Hello, my name is Judith, and I welcome you to Cordial Couture. I would like to start off by thanking each and every one of you that subscribe to my channel, that like my videos and left comments. It's really appreciated. And I'm at the same time want to take this opportunity to remind you that you can always leave comments if you see that I have, if there is a better technique to construct the garment than what I've shown, please let me know and let the rest of us know because we're here to learn together. And those of you who are new to my channel, what I'm doing right now is going through different Lutterloh patterns. I purchased the kit in September, and we know that the Lutterloh system kit doesn't have the assembly instructions for the patterns. And I made my first pattern, I made the second one. Halfway through, I said I should create a channel and share my experience with others, because when I was researching the kit, it was one of the barriers that kept me from purchasing it at first, is because I was scared of the fact that there were no instructions. So I'm going to learn and force myself to learn, and I want to share my experience with all of you so that you can leverage that. And then if you want to purchase the kit, or if you have it and you don't know what to do, well, just go at it, because it is a good system. What I'm wearing today is blouse 145 from the 2023 kit. It's my third video, so if you want to go see how that is assembled, I'll put the link below so you can refer to it. And I also put the link for my second video down below too, if you're new to the channel, because that's where in the description of that video, I share with you a video where you learn how to trace the patterns, and you have different tools if you want to learn more about the Lutterloh system. So that's video number 2. I'll put the link below as well. This is the first garment that I'm sharing with you that I've constructed from A to Z. So all the two others I had already sewn before I made the video. So this one I'm actually going through all the different steps with you. And this video is sort of like a prototype of what I'm thinking of doing in terms of videos going forward. So let me know if this works for you or not. But basically I'm going to start off with an introduction, show you the pattern, the different fabrics I'm going to use. Then we're going to analyze the pattern and all the instructions that are given. And then I will construct the garment, show you the different steps. I'll show you final results, and then we'll conclude and share what we've gathered from this experience. So that's sort of where I'm going with this. If you want something else, more detail, less detail, don't hesitate to leave a comment. I will also try to put a table of contents in the description for the different steps, so that if you only see part of it, then just go ahead and skip to that. So that's where I'm headed with this video. Today we're going to look at pattern 135. It's this purple top here. There's pleats on the shoulders. There's a gathered sleeve here, puff sleeve, and then we have a pleat in the middle of the shirt. I'm going to use this forest green fabric. It's a knit fabric. It's rather thick, and it's a fabric that was given to me by a colleague in the US. So I don't know where she purchased it nor what type of fabric it is, but that is what I'm going to use. I'm pretty sure the garment, the top, would also be very nice with a softer or more I don't know how you say it, but a fabric that's lighter, so that it would probably be very nice as well. So I'm going to change the camera angle and we're going to analyze the pattern. So here is the top 102. If we look closely, I'll just zoom in on this top here. So we have what's special, it's a V-neck top, and it has pleats on the top here. So you've got a small pleat, and then you've got, see the shoulders are a bit rounded here, so that means we have gathered shoulders. There's a front seam, and then we'll see on the back that there's no seam on the back. If we look at the pattern information here, NN is the top, it's a knit fabric, and this is the approximate quantity of fabric that you need for the top. So I'll just turn this over. And again, I'll just zoom out a bit here. If we remember that we have on the pattern here, we have basically, it's the same top, but this one is in a dress format. We have the simple top and then the skirt. So on the back side here, we'll have the skirt on the bottom that we're not interested in. And this is the pattern piece for the top. We see the back here of the top has no seam. Let's start by the sleeve. And as a reminder, when we do the Lutterloh system kit, we take our bust measurement and our hip measurement, and then we use that with the ruler to trace our patterns for a sleeve, it's always the bust measurement that we use. So here we have the different sizes. What's important here is, again, this little notch that indicates the center of the seam of the sleeve that has to be matching with the actual shoulder seam. Here we have the squiggly lines, which indicates that you have to gather. So when we create the sleeve, before putting it together, we'll put in basting stitches and gather the sleeve. We have a V that indicates it's the front of the sleeve. Therefore, when you trace your pattern, you're going to put that V, and then on your fabric, on both sleeves, you're going to indicate V so that you make sure that you put the right sleeve on the right side and the left sleeve on the other side. So that's it. So you trace your pattern. I actually lengthened my sleeve here. Then we have the top, so the front part. If we look at pattern A here, and we come back to the actual picture, I'll just have my envelope here. The top doesn't have any pleats here, but the dress has a bunch of pleats, okay? So if we look closely, our pattern is 102. These pleats only apply to the 101, so the dress. So you don't need to trace these pleats when you copy your pattern over. This again is VM, which means the center front. But there's no dashed line on this, which means you actually have to cut this out in 2 pieces. So let's start from the top. This is the V neckline, and then you're going to trace a facing here for 3 centimeters along this V, and it tapers out to the center front line. These here, you're going to trace these dots because these are the pleats. And you've got your shoulder seam. Again, this is the A, which ties to the A on the other side, so you're basically your shoulder sleeve. You ignore these. This is your waistline. And then this is 102. This is where the top stops, okay? And the rest of the length is for the skirt. So the challenge I had was that there's no dots here to say, if I shrink this, there's no dots here if you're on here that says this you do 24.5. And then the next dot is all the way at the bottom of the skirt and says 64. So you go all the way down to the 64, the 62, then you have the 63, and these are the 3 bottom lengths for the skirt, but you want to stop here. So what you notice here is that it says CA, which means approximately 25 centimeters. So when you trace your pattern, I'll show you this once you've gone through the instructions, I'll show you my pattern. You're going to actually have to put your ruler to the 64, which is going to go way beyond your paper. Hold it down there and then take 25 centimeters and move back up and put a dot. And that's where it's going to be the bottom of this pattern. It took me a while to figure it out, and you're going to ignore all these small measurements because these are for the pleats and you don't have to do the pleats. So the only ones that you're interested in for top 102 is 1, 2, and 3 here. You ignore all these pleats on the bottom. And this is the grain line, and this is where you put your pin. Then on the back piece here, they're reminding us that's the knit fabric. You're going to have your shoulder, you're going to have a back facing, again 3 centimeters, so you're going to trace that. Got your shoulder. This here is a dashed line, which means you place it on the fold. There's no seam on the back. HM is the back middle. Again, you've got pleats that you're going to ignore because it says it's for pattern 101, sorry, and you're doing pattern 102, which cuts off here, but this is your waistline. And I remind you that everything that's above the waistline, so all these dots here, and the same thing on the other side, is with your bust measurement. And anything from the waist and below is with your hip measurement. But again, here, you've got your 62, and your 61 dots here. Those you have to put your tape all the way to 62, hold it down, and then come back up again to the 25, reduce it by 25 centimeters, and that you should get your bottom line. So I'm going to grab the pattern that I actually traced, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so here it's a bit hard to show, but if I take, I'll just put any measure here on the cross, supposing it's this. My pattern says to go to, on this line here, 61. So if I put my pattern all the way to 61 down here, That's for the dress, and then I have to go back up 25 centimeters and put a point here. Same thing on this measure here, which says 62. I have to go all the way down to the 62, which is all the way down here. I can't, okay. And then I have to go back up 25 centimeters and put a dot here. So that's sort of what I say about when you have the top and the bottom that are the same thing. There's another detail that I'm doing different this time, and I'll show you when I construct the garment, is that normally when I do my facing, I have my seam allowance here, and then that's my 3 centimeters, and I would cut it off this. But this time I'm adding a seam allowance because I find my facing is a bit too short. So I'm going to add a seam allowance and try a different technique. So I'll show you that when I construct the garment, how I'm going to go about that. So here we are, and the first part that we're going to do when we construct the garment is to create these pleats here. And what you have to do is normally when you do your pattern and you put the different markings, it'll be on the back side, but you have to transfer them to the front side, otherwise you're going to create the pleats on the back side. So what you do is take the first 2 dots here and you move them over the middle like this. I'll put in a pin. Take the other 2 and move it to the middle like this and put in a pin. And there you have your dart for your front. So you have to do that on both sides. And then what I'm going to do is put in a basting stitch in the seam allowance here. So I'll be right back with the next step. Okay, so here you see I've basted the pleats on the front of the garment. And now I've put both front sides together, and the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the middle front seam all the way along here. And then I'm going to press the seam open and then overlock each side of the seam. I want to have the seams open across the front so it doesn't do a bulk seam. I'm not going to overlock them together. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back. So here you have the front middle seam sewn and pressed flat with the overlock. The next step is to pin the shoulder seams together, so right sides together, to make sure that each end of the shoulder matches up and that the pleat lies flat. So same thing on both sides here. I also pinned the side seams on both sides. And what I will do is I'm going to sew the shoulders, show the sides, and then I'm going to try it on to see how it fits. If everything's okay, I'm going to press the seams open and then finish them off with the overlock. If not, then I'll make adjustments. So that is the next step. I'll be back. Thank you. Okay, so I'm back. I tried on this shirt and it fits. So I did finish off the side with the overlock as well as the top of the shoulders. The next part of the shirt is the facing. So here are my facing pieces, the 2 front facing. And then I have, if I move this over here, this is the back facing. And what I normally do when I do facings is I'll press the interfacing against the wrong side, and then I'll just overlock the edge like this, and the same thing on the bottom here. But as I said earlier, I'm trying a new method, which I saw. So I did put in seam allowances this time on the edges of my facings. And what I'm going to do is, before pressing it, I'm going to turn it over to the right side. And I'll put this one here, which means that the non-sticky side is out. And I'm going to sew a stitch line here, cut the seam allowance, and then I'm going to turn it over so that the facing will look like, I'll have to show you, and then I will press it, and that should be a nicer finish than having to do a seam allowance. Same thing here, I would turn this upside down, right side up, like this. Take the non-sticky side together. I'm going to sew like this along the bottom in the seam allowance, cut the seam allowance, put some notches. Then we're going to turn this around and I'll have a nice round finish, and then I'll press the seam allowances. So I'm going to do that. We'll see the results and I'll be right back. Okay, so here I've sewn my different facings, and I'll just put this here, for example, on this one. So you have, this is the right side. Get this open here. This is the right side, and this side is the non-sticky side. And I did a straight seam. I cut off the seam allowance, and what I'm going to do then, I'm going to turn this over like this. I'm going to iron it so that there's a little bit of, it turns in like this, and that will have a very nice finish on the outside, and I don't need to do overlocking. So I'm going to do that for all my different pieces here. Turn this around the wrong side, iron on my interfacings, and I'll have nice facings like that. That'll end like that. Same for the rounded edge here. I'll turn this around and I'll see if I have to do notches, but it'll really look nice and neat like that once it's finished. I'm going to do that, and then the next step before I come back and show you is that I'm going to then, once everything is turned the right way, is I'm going to attach my different seams on each side to do the round neck, and I'm hoping that the V ends up right as well. So I'll go make this whole neck facing, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here's the neckline. So the first thing I did was I sewed the two long strips together in the middle, and I haven't finished my seams because before I did anything, I wanted to double check and make sure that I had the right measurements. Then I sewed the side seams here on the back, and then this one here. So I've got something that looks like this from the front of your V, and then your shoulders. And now to make sure that I actually did the right measurements, I folded this in half here. I put the shoulder seams together and put a pin the halfway mark. And here's my shirt. I did the same thing where I took my shoulder seams, I put them together like this. Figure out the halfway mark here. So now I'm going to just slip this in and see if this works. So the unfinished side, I'm going to pin the two pins together here. We'll just check this out. And we'll see if we've got something that makes, open up the seams here. Test. Something on the other shoulder. And if I put the V in the middle here, in that, see if the seams align. So they do align here perfectly. And on this side too, that's great. So that means that my neckline is the right size. I'm going to unpin this. What I'm going to do then is actually go ahead, because my ends here, you see this really finished out well. I'm going to actually sew the neckline in place, and I'll be right back. So I've just finished showing the facing. When you sew the facing, you have to make sure that you line up your shoulder seams, your middle seam, and the center back. And when you sew it, you have to make sure that when you turn the fabric around, that the inside, the right side, is on the inside like this. Once you've sewn all around, you're going to cut your seam allowance, and then you're going to put the remaining seam allowance towards the back on the facing side and sew a row of stitching as close as possible to the original stitch line, and that's what we call understitching. And the purpose of that is to have your seam allowance lay flat on the inside. Later on, I'm going to try on the top and see if it does lay flat properly. If not, sometimes I do a row of stitching on the shoulder seams here to tack that in place. So the next step before we finish our seams, or the end of the shirt, is to do the sleeves. So here we have the sleeve cap. If you remember on the pattern, there's a squiggly line on your sleeve cap, which means you have to gather, and that means set your sewing machine to the longest stitch and straight stitch, and then sew a row of stitching all along here, making sure to have long thread tails on both ends, and then sew a second row of stitching here right beside it. So you have 2 rows of long stitches, basting stitches. Do that. Make sure you have your center front marked and your front here. And then what I'm going to do at the same time is I'm going to sew my side seams here. So just a row of stitching and finish with the overlock. So I'll do those 2 steps and I'll be right back. Okay, so here's my sleeve that's sewn, and then these are the 2 basting threads. So what I'm going to do then is take my threads and pull on them, the thread tails, hopefully, and we just keep gathering. So I'll gather to the middle part here on this side. Get my second thread tail here. And keep moving the gathering stitches until you get to the middle here. And we'll just basically do a bunch of gathers, and then eventually when we put this in the sleeve, do the other side here, we're going to adjust it so that it fits with the sleeve cap itself. Okay, so it sort of looks like this. I'm going to do the same thing on the other sleeve, and then I'm going to place this in the sleeve hole and we'll look at that together. Okay, so here I've pinned the bottom seams together, and often I pin it so that the seams go one way and the other so it's not too bulky. I pinned the middle here so that it lines up with my pink line that you can't see really well here. And then I did a bit of pinning on the bottom. There's no gathering on the bottom. So what you have to do then is play around with your seams, your gathering, to make sure it's distributed properly so that it fits, like here. That's fine. So you can pin this in place. You might have to gather a bit here. You play around with it, and you're going to play around with this and move the gathers around like this so that it fits. And then you're going to pin all that in place and sew it. So I'm going to work with my gathers, sew it, and I'll be back. Okay, so here I've got the sleeves that are sewn on. I finished it with the overlock like this. So we see that there are some gathers here, and there's gathers on this side as well. And at the same time, I did finish my cuffs here with black thread over. I have a cover lock machine, which you guys can use a twin needle if you don't have a cover lock machine. So I did that on both sleeves, and I did the same thing on the bottom hem here. I have a cover lock. So I'm going to try the shirt on, and we'll see what this looks like as the final garment. There you have it. That's the third piece that I've made with the Lutterloh system kit. I'm quite satisfied with it as well. It fits well, and I think I'm going to enjoy wearing it. So if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up, and I really invite you to subscribe to my channel and click the notification button. Have a great day, and we'll see each other in the next video. Bye.